This is your life, and this, I need hardly tell you, is Edinburgh. Tomorrow is St Andrew's Day, a special day for millions of Scotsmen, but today, extra special for one of them. For in a career spanning over half a century, and during which his music spanned the world, he is today receiving his first ever gold disc, about to in a few moments in the famous Caledonian Hotel here. A far cry from the mining town tenement where he was born, and the start of a distinguished music career that saw him playing for pennies in the streets of Dundee. Now, some know him as the shyest man in show business, so there's no knowing how he's going to react when he sees me and this.
We are proud to be allowed to share with you in your astonishing achievement.
I'm going in, we'll soon find out. Thank you, Raymond Lopez. Jimmy, you weren't expecting a second presentation, but I came along here so that I could say, musician, conductor, award-winning musician, tonight, Jimmy Shand, this is your life.
No.
Great to see you. Congratulations. Well, Raymond's the only one who knew what was happening. No one else, including yourself. And I hope you'll come along to the studio where I can open a lot more surprises for you.
Very nice, thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, congratulations, Jimmy, on being presented with that gold disc. You weren't expecting a second presentation tonight.
No, not today.
Jimmy Shand, this is your life, and the boy who once played the accordion in the streets of Dundee to raise money for the families of out-of-work miners was years later to become known to millions of viewers on television programs. And here you are in an early show, the sound of Jimmy Shand. You were to another television program, the White Heather Club, one day in 1966, when you walked into the studio and heard this song another star of the show had specially composed.
For he's the laird of Auchtermuchty and his music beats the band. Wherever you stray, you'll hear them say, "You're welcome, Jimmy Shand."
Of course, he wrote and sang that welcoming song, Andy Stewart. And with the more praise of yours, all stars of Scotland, Jimmy Logan, Eamonn Andrews, and Andy, he was just talking about that very song when we drove to the studio. What inspired you to write it?
Well, just the very fact that I was brought up with the legend of Jimmy Shand in our household was a very prevalent thing, and I'm proud of our association. And I was desperate to write a song about Jimmy, and not because that it's very easy to do when you've got his reputation and his legend to work on.
And of course, you've worked with him many times as
know,
well.
I remember in the very first time we did a White Heather show together, Jimmy was standing there and he says, "No, didn't bother speaking to me, laddie. I didn't like to speak on television." And then he says to me, and when I start playing, he says, "Didn't make me laugh because I might miss a note."
Well, Jimmy Logan, whether he misses a note, smiles or not, there's no doubting his popularity.
Oh, he's a great personality. I says, "Oh, mighty me."
And I remember we were touring Canada and America. Remember that, Jimmy? And we had a wonderful tour. And the amazing thing is, everywhere we went, there was dozens of people waiting to see Jimmy Shand. And they all seemed to be relatives, you know, aunties or grannies or cousins or brothers. I don't know what kind of bicycle he had, but he was very popular. And then the last time we met, Jimmy, was when I was in Australia in my show, and then I saw you were appearing at the famous Opera House in Sydney. And I went along there, and of course I went backstage to see Jimmy. You couldn't get backstage. There was crowds of folk all queuing up. And that was near the Anzac Day parades. And I remember standing in the streets for about 4 hours watching these parades, thousands and thousands of Australians, and it was really a wonderful sight. And a friend was with me, and he said, well, I wonder where they've all come from. I said, Jimmy Shand's dressing room.
Well, Jimmy Shand, when you return from those kind of tours, you head straight to your home in the village of Auchtermuchty, Fife. And the Scots lass you married 43 years ago, she is, of course, here tonight, your wife, Anne, and with her your sons, David and Jimmy, and Jimmy's wife, Margaret, and your brothers, Erskine and Henry. Jimmy Shand, this is your life, and you first heard the songs of Scotland in the pit villages of East Weems, Fife, where you were born the sixth of a family of 9 children on January 28th, 1908. Your father was a mine worker, and at 14 you too went down to the pit to work. Soon to experience in 1926 the hardship of months of unemployment when the miners were locked out in a bitter dispute with the pit owners over a cut in wages. To feed their close to starving families, miners organized soup kitchens, paid for as best they could by themselves. You were 18 and wanted to help, so with the accordion your father had taught you to play when you were a child, you set out for Dundee to play in the streets for pennies for the soup kitchens. But Erskine, when Jimmy was learning to play, he didn't have to travel far to attract his first audiences.
He used to just take his melody out in the stairhead and play, and the neighbours all just opened the doors and listened.
And after the miners' lockout, Jimmy, you had to take what work you could find as a navvy, a hod carrier, cable layer, and later in a workshop turning out concrete blocks. Now, to get away from the stifling cement dust, you eat your lunchtime sandwiches in the yard outside, sometimes in freezing temperatures, until one day you get this invitation from a pal who works beside you.
Come home with me, Jimmy, and get some hot soup inside you.
That invitation nearly 50 years ago led to a lifelong friendship with his family. They're here tonight, George Denham and his sisters, Mrs. Isa Binney and Mrs. Annie Stewart. So, George, now you lived across the street from the workshop, and Jimmy started going to your house for his midday meal.
He did, yes.
What did you think of your mother's cooking?
Well, it was so good, he came back again.
And Eddie, your mother became very fond of Jimmy.
Yes, she did. Yeah, we all did. And when we came to Dundee, Jim spent his weekends with us. And then he got a job there, and eventually stayed with us.
And Isa, by that time, Jimmy was beginning to get frequent requests to play at local concerts and weddings, and you had a very important role in his early successes.
Yes, remember how I used to polish your shoes, Jim?
That's right.
And always the instep to be shiny. Remember that?
That's
when you were going on your concerts, yeah. And you gave me threepence for doing that, remember?
Thank you, Isa Binney, Annie Stewart, and George Denham. Jimmy, what was so important about having the instep shining?
In case I was going to show them a clean pair of heels.
Well, it was 1933, when you were 25, that you got your first job in the music business. One day you're walking along Kings Road, Dundee, when you stop to look in the window of a music store that stocks a wide range of accordions. You go in to try one out. George Denham, when he went in to try one out, what happened next?
Well, when he came to Dundee, out for a job, and passing music seller, accordion seller's business one day, he thought he'd go in and have a look at the accordions, and he picked one up, and of course, he couldn't resist to get a tune out of it. The proprietor of the business, what was that here? So he approached him. I could do with your help, such as what? Jim said. Well, travelling salesman, demonstrating. Thing.
In fact, Jimmy, you were already writing tunes at this time too, and the shop owner was so impressed he told a recording company about you. The result was your first recorded composition titled Lunan Bay. And this is how you sounded playing it 45 years ago. Well, Jimmy, I don't know whether you or Andy noticed there, but you were almost smiling on that picture of you taken at that time. Well, you had plenty to smile about, because not only your recordings sell by the thousand, but 1933 was also the year you met Anne. Now, Anne, tell me, what was your first impression of him?
Well, I mean, he was a fast driver on a motorbike, I mean.
I see.
And also the car. I think if Jimmy hadn't been a musician, I think he'd been a car driver as a racer.
Well, you were married on January the 24th, 1935 at Collinsborough Town Hall. And Anne, you've a special memory of the speed merchant you were marrying.
He was late for his wedding.
True, Jimmy?
Oh, that's late. There was ice on the roads, we couldn't get up the brae into the village.
Well, in 1940, Jimmy, you joined the fire service for the duration of the war. And you formed your very first band, a part-time setup which helped boost wartime morale. At war's end, you become full-time professional and your popularity spreads across the Irish Sea. It's 1954, and you load up the band bus, which you call the Bonnie Dundee, at Glasgow, and set sail for the city of Cork, where you're booked to play the Arcadia Ballroom, which holds just over 1,000 people.
But when we got there, we found 3,000 people had bought tickets to see you, Jimmy.
He drove the bus for you and your band for 15 years. A great pal of yours from Dundee, Andy Gow. And it sounds like Jimmy had a few problems there, a couple of thousand problems, in fact.
That's so, Eamonn. I drove the bus as usual. We called it Bonnie Dundee. When we got to Cork, there was thousands of people blocking the street. And we got a fantastic reception. And you mind, Jimmy, the Irish policeman? He had the right answer. He says, we'll let them in the front door, and when it gets overcrowded, we'll open the doors at the back, and we'll get pushed right out the back. Is that right?
Thank you, Andy Gow. In fact, Jimmy, you'd only come into Cork when you were having your meal when one of the guards came to see you, isn't that right?
Yeah. He wondered if we'd come along a couple of hours early to start the dance, to get the roads cleared.
To start it a couple of hours early, get the roads cleared. I'm just translating for you down south. Anyway, Andy Gow was the man who was driving the bus, and Chick, you know of an occasion, don't you, when Jimmy took the wheel of the bus himself?
Yes. It has it that Andy didn't turn up for some reason or other, and Jimmy decided to take the bus himself. And Jimmy, though a thoroughly competent driver, is a very fast driver. So a rather apprehensive band followed them into the van. And making their way back from wherever they'd been playing, Jimmy's tearing along fairly fast, but thoroughly competent. And he said, probably over his shoulder, I don't think he'd turn around, you know what I mean? Maybe he did, I wasn't there. He said, I'll never make, if you'll excuse the actor Mukti, I'll never make this wreck turn, but hang on. So he made straight through a fence into a field. And this rather discomfited crew came out with him, and all Jimmy could do was make straight back to the road that he had left, and said, look at these brake marks, look at them. Eh? Straight as a die.
Well, whatever your reputation as a driver, Jimmy, you become a popular radio broadcaster in the late 40s and early 50s, and in 1956 you make your television debut in a show compared by Ian Wallace there, right, Ian?
That's quite right, Eamon. And this business about Jimmy being straight-faced worried our producer terribly. He said, it doesn't matter on radio, but now he's on television, he's got to smile. And he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. And he told me what to do. We didn't do this in the rehearsal, but on transmission, when he came up to me, I said, Jimmy, what's all this I hear about you tearing around the roads at night on a motorbike? And he grinned from ear to ear and he said, who told you that?
Well, that same year, Jimmy, you start your long association with the popular television show, The White Heather Club, but there was a particular performance on that show that television viewers didn't see. It was 22 years ago, and in a very unusual location. In fact, at the Bridgeverne Hospital in Perthshire. And there, in Ward 2, an old pal of yours is waiting to talk to you, leader of the Guy Gordon's Dancers from the White Heather Club, none other than Jack Cooper.
Hello, Jimmy. Remember this ward? This is where your wife Anne was taken when she took ill in 1956. And when she got better and returned home, you made a promise to the matron, Miss McCombie.
That's right, Jimmy. You promised you'd come back back here at Christmas time with the Guy Gordons and put on a special show for the patients in this ward.
And of course, that Christmas, you brought us all here, and here we are again, Jimmy, all of us. You struck up your music like this, Jimmy, and we danced like this. But when all the other patients heard about this, Jimmy, they didn't want to be left out. They wanted to see all the entertainment too. Now, there are 20 wards in this hospital, and you didn't want to disappoint anybody, Jimmy, so this is what happened. Five or 6 hours later, we got away. Well, when it comes to doing anything for others less fortunate, that's Jimmy Shand. See you, Jimmy.
See you, Jimmy.
Bye.
And reassembled especially for you for the first time in 10 years. Here they are, Jack Gordon and the Guy Gordons. Jack Cooper, of course, and certainly a memorable visit to that hospital, Jimmy. And there was a patient at another hospital 20 years ago for whom your music has a very special memory too. She was a young girl, victim of a road accident, and for 3 months she lay in a coma, her life in the balance.
And I'm convinced it was your music, Jimmy, that saved my life.
From Penzance in Cornwall, where she now lives, to greet you again after 15 years, Marjorie Mitchell. Marjorie, many different methods were tried by the medical team to bring you back to consciousness. Then your late mother told doctors that your fondness for Jimmy's music. What happened then?
They played Jimmy's music every day to me to try and coax me out of a coma. And it happened. And that music has stayed special to me then, and it's still very, very special to me now, Jimmy.
Thank you. Marjorie Mitchell. Well, Jimmy, that music of yours is played the world over. And in 1964, you set off on a tour of Australia and New Zealand. And although she can't be here in person tonight, someone has been recalling the night you arrived in Auckland. Right now, she has to be in Yorkshire preparing for a special Christmas program. But if you look at that screen, Jimmy, she reminds you now of that time in Auckland 14 years ago when she heard a tapping on her bedroom door. Singer
Hello,
Moira
Jimmy.
Anderson.
Well, this is the nearest I could get to Ochtermachty, and I must say I'm very happy and delighted to be included in this tribute to you tonight. I don't know if you remember when we really got to know each other. It was after we arrived in Auckland in New Zealand to begin a tour there. And we had had a very long flight from Britain. And when we arrived, of course, we were very tired and we checked into our hotel rooms. And I was busy unpacking my case. And there was a knock at the door. And when I opened it, you were standing there. And you said, "I wonder if you could help me, lassie." And I said, "Oh, certainly, Mr. Shand." He said, "I've just sat down," he says, "and I've knocked the backside of these pyjamas." He says, "Could you sew them for me?" Well, you've had me in stitches ever since. And I'll tell you something else. You've always been the cat's pyjamas with me. I just love you dearly, and I'm delighted just to send this message to you tonight. I hope you have a lovely time, Jimmy, and it's a well-deserved honour for you.
Thank you, Moira Anderson. Andy Stewart, Jimmy here, it's obvious, is held in highest esteem by Scots all over the world, isn't he?
Yes, indeed. And in Ireland, too. I tell you, I was in Ireland last week, and about the last thing that was said to me in Dublin, we were talking about, just purely coincidentally, we were talking about Jimmy. And the promoter who brought me over says to me, he says, "Do you think you could do your very level best," as he's a Kerry man, "do you think you could do your very level best," as he, "to get Jimmy to come back over to Ireland sometime, because so everybody's dying to see him, and we all love him. And if you see Jimmy, send him our love." And this happens everywhere in the world. I think, without exception, no matter where you go, people speak with great respect of Jimmy. And of course, we're all not only love Jimmy, but we're very proud of Jimmy, because he's kept alive a tradition of Scottish music, the tradition of the Mackers and of Robert Burns, and a tradition that means a great deal to a great many of us. And we're delighted to see in this day and age the resurgence of the fiddle and accordion clubs throughout Scotland. A fantastic thing this is to all of us who love our own music, and I know to Jimmy as well. And if it wasn't for Jimmy, you wouldn't get these brilliant young lads coming along and playing the music they do. Jimmy, from all of us, for your music, thank you very much indeed.
And as you say, for a man who's supposed to be retired, I know that he's playing to some old people in a little fishing village tomorrow, another one on Monday, another one on Saturday, and that gives you as much pleasure as the big concert halls, doesn't it?
Definitely.
And to a particular man, Jimmy, the most unforgettable audience you ever played to was not in concert halls in Toronto or Auckland either, but in a cottage in the village of Kintail in Perthshire.
Unforgettable, Jimmy, to me, because your audience numbered only one, and he was my father.
A great pal of yours for 46 years. We've flown him 9,000 miles from his home in Western Australia, Ian Powery. Ian, tell us about that time, will you?
Well, it's a long time ago, of course, and my father had been very ill for a long time. He knew that there wasn't long to go, and we knew there wasn't long to go. Jimmy Shand had got to know there wasn't long to go as well. I was away on tour with the band. I used to try and get along to see Dad as often as I could. But when I came back from one of the tours there, I went along to see him, and he said, I had Jimmy up, and he gave me a tune. He said he sat and played all afternoon. And I thought to myself, well, that's how I want to remember Jimmy Shand, with his audience of one.
And of course, Ian, you and Jimmy once made an album together, appropriately titled When Old Friends Meet. Well, now, you've met again tonight, and I know that you wouldn't return to Scotland without your fiddle.
Too true.
And as you can see, there are a few more old pals of yours, Jimmy, that we've brought along their musical instruments tonight. All former members of the Jimmy Shand Band, some of them going back 30 years. But that's not quite the end, Jimmy, for there's someone who learned to dance a Scottish jig to your music when she was a toddler. And I know she's the apple of her grandfather's eye, your 12-year-old granddaughter, Diane. Jimmy Shand, this is your life. Well done.